This video is sponsored by Full Moon Features. If you love horror collectibles, make sure to check out Full Moon's Tiny Terrors. Stick around for more information at the end of the video, or go to the website in the link below. Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And yes, we have the exclusive and, I guess, wonderful opportunity to check out Pet Sematary Bloodlines as part of our coverage for Fantastic Fest. Yes, this is, again, a big honor. We did get to put out a video just a few days ago announcing this. And yeah, man, we've got a pretty good list of films, and I assume some more to come through. So this was definitely one that when we got the announcement for really early on in the coverage as it was rolling out, that I was definitely like, yes, let's get this done. Let's get it in the books. Because, yeah, I guess it hasn't really been deeply expressed, but I was not a fan of Pet Sematary 2019. And Luke, you haven't seen that one yet, have you?
I have not. It remains a blind spot for me. And yes, you said it hasn't really been expressed, but there will be a time here on the channel that I'm sure we will get to express our feelings, probably
Very
sooner
soon,
rather
yes.
than later.
Mhm.
That's still one I have not checked out. I was going to try to check it out before checking out Bloodlines here, but with time management just was not to be. So I will rectify that here in the next few weeks, and we'll see how this fits in with Bloodlines and everything.
Absolutely. But with that said, I mean, you are a fan of the original two films. So it's one of those things where I enjoy the first one quite a bit. It was one of the rare films that actually freaked me out as a child with, the sister character and everything. And then, the sequel I've only seen once, but it is one of those things that I remember watching very faintly on a like AMC horror, fest kind of thing. And yeah, that's about my exposure to it. But I know you have a much deeper love for some of these.
Yeah, especially the sequel. I think the sequel remains just absolute so much fun. It's one of those sequels where you can go back and rewatch it. I did discover that on an AMC Fear Fest as well. So anytime that one would pop on every year, and they would play it, as on rotation regularly as well. Even not during the month of October. It was something I always made time for. So I would say probably more so that sequel is something I have a deep love for.
Absolutely. And so I was again curious about this one. This was talked about way back in 2019 when obviously that film had come out. And, I think the general consensus from horror fans was that it was a very unnecessary, unneeded, reinterpretation or remake in a sense. It landed for some people, didn't for others. And again, I was one of those people. It really didn't land for me. So when they started talking about doing kind of like a prequel and going back to some of the elements that make Pet Sematary what it is, that did intrigue me. But for the most part, I was just like, I could take it or leave it. So, this was pretty shocking to hear that this was not only, still on the table, but that it was coming out very soon when we got that announcement on Sunday Scaries a few months ago. And yeah, we're here to cover it. We're here to talk about it. We have not said anything to each other about this one just yet. We know we've watched it. And I guess I'll take the jump and just say I was impressed with how much I actually enjoyed this movie. I found myself pretty happy with a lot of the things they chose to do. Is it perfect? No. But I gotta say, for someone going in with very low expectations, this did, in fact, give me a little bit of pause in saying, I think that I want to see a little bit more from the Pet Sematary universe.
Yeah, and for me as well, not seeing that 2019 version of it, I didn't really know what to expect. I think maybe unjustifiably, sometimes when I see, living through and watching so many sequels from the 80s and 90s and even into the early 2000s, where you have something called like Pet Sematary Bloodlines, where it's kind of like you kind of have an indication of maybe what that's going to be in terms of quality, especially when you look at something like a Hellraiser franchise and they started just throwing things. So I wasn't really sure what to expect for this one. I wasn't sure if maybe after that 2019 and not being those positive reviews, if they were going to put a lot of effort into this one, but I enjoyed this one. I will say, I think it was a Very intriguing storyline that they
Hmm.
presented here. I think a lot of elements really worked. They really took advantage of that time period because this is in, I believe, 1969.
Yeah. Hmm.
And they're dealing with a lot of interesting elements, primarily the Vietnam War and the toll that takes on just a community in general, especially a close knit community like Ludlow. I think just that different take on it. I really enjoyed this. A lot of the character development I think was really well done.
Absolutely. And yeah, if I want to get into my first real positive on the film here, it's the characters. Again, this is another great film that, like we said with Black Mold a few weeks ago, was just that this has really good characters. And I think that the actors are all on point. There were a lot of familiar faces, but even the people that were new to this, I caught myself actually being really involved in and just really enjoying. Obviously, we have Jackson White is leading this. So he's playing Judd, as in a sense. He's the younger version of him, and that's kind of a meaty role. That's something that you got to really step into for not only horror fans, but I think cinema fans in general, or people who are familiar with Stephen King's work. That's a character that a lot of people, I would say, are pretty synonymous with Stephen King's work. So to come in and have to play the younger version of that, I was very impressed with his chops. I thought that he was both parts very charismatic, but he was able to hold his own on screen. There was never a moment in this movie where I didn't believe him as his character. I felt that he fit in the world beautifully.
And looking at that, it can be a little daunting to take a character like this, and there's already been groundwork laid. Whether you were talking about, the 2019 or the original Pet Cemetery, audiences are familiar with that character. And if you're a big fan of the Pet Cemetery franchise, you probably have a love for that character. So taking on that role and making that character likable, you're going to be put under a microscope, I think.
Hmm.
And even looking at the cast, other than the usual suspects that we know in the horror community, which, watching Bloodlines, you're going to know who I'm talking about. A lot of the cast here, especially the younger, I was unfamiliar with. And
Hmm.
Jackson White is Judd Crandall, I think, was a real treat to watch throughout this. I think to put the film primarily on his shoulders for the most part and being our leading man and really going through the series of events with him, I think you resonate with him. And it's nothing where he's putting on an absolutely deep performance, but it's just a likable performance, I
Hmm.
think, in general. And I think it really takes us on that journey with him. And then looking at the dynamics here that are in place, I think it was really well done. Where I'll pull from film we have seen, Scream, the latest installment of Scream, where it's like the core four, and for me, that relationship, that dynamic of those characters doesn't really work. It doesn't feel natural for the most part for me. But in this, we have Judd, we have Timmy, we also have Manny, and they're kind of dealing with a little bit of a broken kind of friendship. And I think it's presented really well, and I think the dynamic there is something that feels natural, feels real.
Absolutely. And I want to give another shout out to a newcomer here who's not essentially a newcomer. I do recognize him from The Revenant, but I haven't seen him in much since. But Forrest Goodluck as the character of Manny was a very nice addition to the story. I thought that they had a lot of great interplay. You could tell that there was a little bit of a rift between them, but I enjoyed the twists and turns they took with the relationship, in the sense of it wasn't that kind of as you're watching it, you kind of expect them to have that blow up moment of like, you aren't my friend anymore and all that. But no, they it felt very natural. It felt very much like just people who got older and kind of drifted apart, but they don't necessarily have a reason to dislike each other. And I thought that was really smart in how they handled it. Obviously there's a lot of big names attached to this as well, so I want to shout out Henry Thomas. I thought has an excellent role as playing Dan Crandall, who is Judd's father. I thought that he brought a lot of heart to this film. And David Duchovny, maybe a bit underused. He does have a presence in the film, but at the end of the day, I would say that him and probably Pam Grier, who are both actors I really enjoy, they don't have the biggest roles. I know they're kind of being plastered all over the marketing for this, but they aren't necessarily the focus. They're good, but they are a bit underused.
Yeah, and both those character or actors, I was excited to see. Pam Grier, I have an absolute love for, so I was
Hmm.
really hoping maybe for a bigger role for her. But you know, it's serviceable. It's nothing groundbreaking or anything like that. Same with David Duchovny. He's in it, but he's not the primary focus. So it's great to see these familiar faces. I think we're always going to ask maybe for a little bit more screen time with them just because we don't see these actors as often as we may like. And
Hmm.
then, I think a lot of promotional things when an image was released, it was David Duchovny, it was Pam Grier, it was, a lot of a lot of actors that we're familiar with. So we kind of came hoping to see a little bit more of them. Yeah, they are kind of just there. I mean, there are some big events that these characters are integral in. So, I think they're used really to facilitate the events here, but it's nothing like. I think you end up liking the characters because of the actors, not because of what they actually do in the film.
Yeah, and I guess there's a fine line you have to walk there, but I do think that they service their roles well, and I think that overall, I gotta say the cast was really well in this. Like, I
Hmm.
enjoyed the way this film was casted, how everybody played. They all felt very natural, and I gotta say, for one of the big turnoffs for me as far as seeing the marketing for this was again following that kind of 2019 aesthetic to it. In the trailer for the most part, but once you get into the film, they do really lean into that 1960s, early 70s kind of vibe to the film, and I did appreciate that. It does make it feel very much like it is set in its time that it's supposed to be. Again, there's a little bit of that modern tinge that kind of takes me out of it a little bit. It kind of, I feel like, has a bit of a wonky stride as it goes. Like, they have a lot of really great tracks in this as far as just like
Yes.
needle drops go. Very classic, very 60s. All your big Vietnam film songs pop up here, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, they do well with that. And it does have its moments though where it does kind of feel like, okay, yeah, this isn't necessarily as period PC as I think they were hoping for. And I mean, that might be a budgetary thing. But with that said, on the other hand, I do think that this was something I probably would have liked to have seen show up in theaters. I understand that, with the way the last one did, that it wasn't going to happen because, obviously streaming is where it's at now, and they didn't want to take the chance because of the critical reception of the last one. But I think this would have done really well if this would be releasing on October 6th in theaters. I think that this could have really stood a chance because it does have a lot of those creepy elements to it. They handle the Stephen King lore of Pet Sematary really well in the sense of not kind of over explaining anything, because that's what you really run into the problem with prequels and sequels, is that you just get too much of the unmasking, and they really don't do that. They really just show you more of the horrors that come from having an element like the Pet Cemetery.
Yeah, and for me, I think in terms of this being in the theater, I'm a little bit more on the opposite end of that. I think I was pleasantly surprised with this one, not knowing what to expect going into it. I think looking at this film, and I think the runtime says about an hour 27. I kind of did the timestamp. Credits roll about hour 21. Not necessarily that it has to be a long film or anything like that. I think what we do have here is a very good film, but I feel like maybe if you did go to the theater to see this, maybe you would want a little bit more. I think without diving too deep into the story here, a lot of the events kick off closer toward the end of this film. It really everything unravels at that point. In like looking at something to compare this to a slasher, whatever you want to say, Friday the 13th, Halloween, anything where I think maybe I would have liked a little bit more attention from our kind of our force, our evil force, kind of doing certain I don't know, like extra things, whether it's killing or anything like that, prior to the events of unraveling everything, because I feel like it kind of went telling a story and then we jumped into everything that was happening, this big series of events. So I would have loved a little bit more attention of maybe the town wondering what's going on and kind of getting that inkling that that evil force is back and they're kind of just trying to pinpoint what exactly is going on. So I think overall, I was really pleased with the film. I think maybe there are a couple things in here that prevent this from being something that's completely noteworthy within the next couple of years. But overall, I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah, and I've been very kind in praising this pretty much throughout the review, but I will say that I agree. I think that there was a point here where you could have pumped the brakes a little bit, and you didn't have to have it be such a breakneck hour 27-minute film. I think if we would have landed closer to an hour 35, maybe fleshed out some of those moments, like you said, with the tension, with the town, just because, again, I think that all the acting was serviceable. I think that everybody was really into their characters. So even if it did come down to more character stuff, I think that would have been a positive. So, it's not a bad criticism when we're sitting here saying, hey, I wanted a little bit more. But I do agree with you in the sense of just like, is this going to like really blow people's minds? I don't think so. I think that this was more shocking for me because my expectations were so low, and I feel like a little bit of that rubbed off on you because you haven't seen the 2019, so you kind of go into that anticipating, more of the same. But I think that as far as the Pet Sematary movies go, this is another good one to throw on the pile. I think that with the original, the sequel to that, and this, I think that this is another fine addition to it. I think if you put these all in a pack, you'd have a good selection here. And unfortunately, one of the elements that I do think kind of holds us back is going to be the fact that it is tied to that 2019 film, and it is directly after doing some research. Yes, this is picking up off of those timelines and events, or picking up before. So you kind of have to take in the baby in the bathwater there, where it's like, okay, yeah, we have this film that wasn't so loved, but then we have this film that's actually pretty good afterwards. So, I feel like if they just would have made this kind of like how they did Doctor Sleep, where they tried to make it a little bit more like the book, like a tie to the book, but also had elements from the film, I think that that would have played a little bit better. But again, that's just something that I feel like is more for Stephen King fans to debate, negotiate about, and for horror fans in general. I feel like any general audience member isn't really going to care. They're going to go see it because of the name Pet Sematary, and hopefully they're as pleasantly surprised as we were.
Yeah, and after watching this, I want to a minor criticism because it doesn't appear that much in the actual film itself. There's really some questionable CGI that takes place. It just in a couple scenes. It's not pounding you over the head. So it's not going to be overly offensive. You'll know when you see it that it is really questionable. But it wasn't something that really sticks out in my brain so much to really pinpoint a negative on this film. It's just something that you kind of have to deal with at this point. But overall, this film, I think, is a good installment in the Pet Sematary franchise. It's something where, other than the Stephen King name, I think Pet Sematary maybe struggles, especially with a modern audience, to garner that kind of attraction that something like an It has, a Doctor Sleep, things like that. This is kind of maybe, at this point, maybe B-level Stephen King, just because it isn't as notable as maybe to modern audiences after that late 80s and then early 90s film. Overall, I think this was a fun watch. I think, is this the funnest watch in the Pet Sematary franchise? No, I still think that goes to Pet Sematary 2. I think there may be just a couple things that pull us away from being, as much fun as it could be. But again, I think this deals with a lot more serious social issues for the year of 1969, and I was not expecting that. And I think a lot of great performances, a lot of great character dynamics. So I think this was a win for Pet Sematary, and this is definitely something where if you're subscribed to Paramount Plus and this is popping up, definitely watch it. If you're not subscribed, I think it's worth a subscription to check this one out.
At least a free trial. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, like, I think that this is definitely something that was sorely needed for the name Pet Cemetery. And again, it's not going to blow your socks off, but I think that you're going to be pleasantly surprised, not surprised, whatever. But yeah, no, guys, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of Pet Sematary Bloodlines. And yes, we are in the Fantastic Fest buzz. We've been here for a couple days now, checking out films, getting things going. And we will be covering more and more as the week goes on. So stay right here. with all of that coverage, as well as feel free to check out our sponsor for these videos. We are working with Full Moon Features and their Tiny Terrors line. Yes, we do have a link in the description where you can get yourself a little subscription notification. Just punch your email in, and you will know exactly when more information about these little figurines drops. So if you're a fan of Full Moon Features, definitely subscribe to that, because I guarantee you guys are going to love these figurines once we can get our hands on them and show them off. But yeah, other than that, lots of great stuff coming to the channel. Like we said, Fantastic Fest, it's going well so far. So we'll see what more we have. We got a lot of weird stuff. We got a lot of off the beaten path stuff, and we got a lot more stuff we're crossing our fingers on. We'll be able to check and cover for you guys. So, alrighty, I guess that about wraps us up. So until next time, I am Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.